I'm not going to call the chief judge to say, hey, how do we fix this? I will go to the source, those relationships, those trust relationships that you have built. Likewise, in my committees that I sit, sometimes when I have issues within my respective jurisdiction, the solution is out there. It's in those relationships that I've formed. So I would call someone from my MACAM, even though they're in a whole different state, they might be faced with similar stuff. And so I really take pride in the forging of those relationships and maintaining those relationships because they do help in the work that I do. And that's the key to really building those relationships. That's key.
Hello, and welcome to Revolutionary Leadership, the bi-weekly podcast that shines a spotlight on the visionary leadership approaches Black women have cultivated for generations, yet are too often overlooked. I'm Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, a culture architect, racial equity strategist, and scholar of organizational change. For more than 20 years, I have helped leaders, organizations, and communities reimagine what's possible when equity and authenticity guide the way. Each episode will dive deep into conversations that illuminate how Black women integrate community care, radical self-prioritization, and collective capacity building into transformative leadership practices. Together, we'll expand what leadership can look like and what liberation through leadership truly means. Because this is where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprints. Welcome back to Revolutionary Leadership, where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprints. Black women have always been masters of strategic navigation, developing sophisticated approaches to understanding and transform power structures in organizations never designed for our leadership. Yet, in many professional spaces, Black women face a critical challenge. Organizational politics is often formed as either something to avoid or something that requires compromising your integrity. Today's episode reveals how political intelligence becomes a revolutionary leadership advantage, not through manipulation or game playing, but through understanding systems so we can transform them while advancing our goals with complete authenticity. We're joined by a leader whose work shows how Black women convert political challenges into opportunities for systemic change and extraordinary impact. This conversation explores how leaders access power dynamics, build strategic coalitions, influence without formal authority, and create lasting transformation in traditional institutions. Today's guest is Stephanie Medina, a historical leader in Maryland's Judiciary and an expert in organizational transformation. In October 2022, Stephanie made history as the first female and first person of color appointed as court administrator for the Circuit Court of Baltimore County. With over 14 years of experience navigating one of the most traditional hierarchical systems in the country, she has mastered the art of building strategic influence while maintaining institutional integrity. She is also President-elect of Mid-Atlantic Association for Court Management, the former chair of the Maryland Conference of Circuit Court Administrator, member of the Maryland Judicial Council, and certified court executive and instructor for Maryland Judicial College, and she previously served as a Deputy Director General for the Belize Red Cross. Stephanie holds a Master's in Criminology and a Master's in Organizational Development and Leadership. Born and raised in Belize, Central America, Stephanie brings a cross-cultural perspective to navigating U.S. institutional politics, helping to modernize judicial systems while honoring the integrity of law. Stephanie is also a good friend, so I know we're going to have an authentic conversation about the realities of navigating organizational politics with both strategic brilliance and unwavering integrity. Stephanie, before we dive in, what are you sipping on today?
Oh, so I've started this new I've always liked to juice, but now I'm like really into juicing. So I'm sipping on my beetroot juice. I've been doing that every morning. I have beetroot juice. This one has pineapple and ginger in it, so it's really good. Gives it a really good kick.
Perfect. Sounds delicious. Well, I have my old standby hot turmeric tea on this breezy, cold morning. And so let's jump in with some rapid fire questions.
Mm.
So, as the first woman and first person of color in your role, how did you assess the political landscape before making your first major decision?
So, that's interesting because although I was the first in this role, I was not new to the Maryland Judiciary. I've been there for 10 plus years. So,
Ah.
yeah. So first in Baltimore County, but I knew the landscape. So I just spent my first, say, 60 days just kind of listening strategically, sort of mapping influence and trust that was within the Baltimore Circuit Court because I was a little new to that. I was the deputy court administrator in this court. But still, when you get a new role, I was just trying to understand the players, key players, connect with the county and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what I did in my first, I would say, 60 days or so.
Strategic. All right. What's the one unwritten rule or power dynamic in the judiciary that you had to understand strategically in order to lead effectively?
That's a good question because we joke around this within our court administrator circle because we say there's two things unwritten that you don't really mess with. You don't mess with a judge's parking. I know that sounds funny. Parking and their judicial assistant. So, so for me, that was the unwritten portion. Like, I believe that we have different statuses within a court. The ecosystem, I think, is what I consider it that, that's important to understand. And judicial assistants, that's where they come in play. They play such a critical role in a judge's in sort of managing communication, the workflow, the priorities. And so I felt like as a court leader, building that trust within that group of individuals, the judicial assistants, that would create a stronger bridge for me between court administration and the bench. And therefore you get more buy-in and you get to easier to introduce change and sustain it. So that was kind of where I made sure I navigate into that area.
Nice. Smart move. Smart move. When you are the only in the room, how do you build coalitions without compromising your vision for change?
When you're the only in the room, I think that you sort of don't lead with difference. You're the only, so you lead with different. I think I tried to, as much as possible, lead with alignment. So just understanding what are some of their pain points? What are the things that are issues for the bench? Maybe there's slow dockets, they're frustrated with, etc. And then I try to incorporate that into my vision. And so I feel like by doing that, it's sort of you're getting their buy-in. They feel like they're part of that process and it works smoother. So I feel like you're not compromising what your vision is, but you're kind of listening to some of their pain points and just kind of bringing the two together.
Ooh, these are such important foundations.
Yeah.
The way that you move and have the ability to move successfully. So now let's dive deeper into your journey. Let me start with something from earlier in my career to set the tone. And so I'm going to take us back to my early days in financial services that completely changed how I understood organizational politics. First, I was just like there, and that's just, how things happen. I was leading a cross functional team developing investment products for underserved markets. And so the business case was solid, compelling research, clear revenue projections, and alignment with organizations' stated diversity commitments. But I was presenting to the executive committee. I hit an unexpected resistance. Senior partners who publicly championed the work that I was doing suddenly raised concerns about if the market was ready and if it was compliant from a regulatory standpoint that hadn't appeared in any of the research that I had done or any of the previous conversations. And so my first approach was purely analytical, like go get more data, go do more research, appealing to public commitments, more results, more meetings, more delays. And then I realized that this wasn't a technical challenge, it was political. The resistance wasn't about the quality of the proposal, it was about the unstated concerns around risk and reputation and resource allocation. And so I shifted completely. And instead of defending, I spent time understanding the individual decision makers' priorities and concerns. So, kind of like you talked about, like, what are
Hmm.
the things that they care about? Where are the alignments? And some worried about client perceptions, other worried about regulatory attention, others worried about resource demands, from their division. And so when I was armed with that political intelligence, I restructured both my proposal and my coalition, and the proposal was approved within 2 weeks. I would have spent another like 6 months on trying to move folks in a way that didn't align with the things that they were most worried about. Your response to one of those rapid fire questions really had me thinking about that. And so you stepped into a historical role in one of the most traditional systems in the country, the court system. So walk me through how you assess the political landscape when you moved into this new role. So I understand you had been there for 10 years before taking on this promotion. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
What did you need to understand before you could start leading change? So take us on, a more deeper dive and like really understanding where alignment might be with other
Yeah.
with other people.
I think what you said is so important. A lot of times we want to overthink a situation, or you feel like you need to bring in so many different things into play to try to come up with a solution. And I think that's what I made sure I did not do. So I didn't walk in trying to change the system and trying to change things. And I think a lot of times we feel like because we get a new position, that's what we need to do. It's not working. We got to fix everything. So I did not, because what you said was important. Courts are old institutions, so they're grounded in a lot of these. This is the way it has been done. So yes, you want to make the change, but they're also so adamant about how things are working as it is
Hmm.
in the present moment. And so what I did instead was I walked in trying to understand what already moved things. It was sort of a plus for me having been with the judiciary for that long, and also kind of forming those relationships with other court administrators or deputy court administrators or just other court leaders, and understanding maybe what their jurisdiction. What's interesting in the judiciary is that, you have Maryland Judiciary, but then we have these smaller, we have jurisdictions. And so like Baltimore County is a jurisdiction. What works in Baltimore City might not work in Baltimore County. So having conversations with court leaders from other jurisdictions and just understanding what works for them sort of equipped me for my new role, because then I walked into a new situation, but I had a lot of knowledge on what's working in Maryland on a whole to sort of then implement in Baltimore County. And so in my meetings with the bench, which is the body that I work closely with, and trying to get their buy-in, it was sort of listening to them. I needed to understand the story that they were telling themselves about the court, what worked in the past, what didn't work right now, and then just kind of sort of taking those ideas and those concerns that they had and trying to sort of, make them fit into the vision that I had for moving the court forward. But I think it was just, for me, the most important stuff in anything that we do is just sort of to try to get that buy-in, because regardless, every judge is unique. Every judge runs their courtroom the way that they feel like. Yes, you have policies and guidelines and procedures and all that good stuff, but that's sort of their little space and they control that. For example, in Baltimore County, I have 21 circuit court judges. So I have to understand 21 different personalities, what works for each of them, their staff. And so it's just a whole bunch of different little pieces that I got to put together and make sure they all click and work. And so the only way to do that is to really reach out to the staff and kind of hear the stories that they're telling. And then at the end of the day, sit back and say, okay, what would work for the institution as a whole based on all these little pieces that I have? And that's kind of how I go about doing it.
Nice. So mapping it out and then putting it together all like a puzzle to a whole
Very
to
much a puzzle.
yes, yes. So that everyone can see their interests sort of represented. Genius, genius.
Yeah.
So you're also talking about sort of working these verticals, if you will, for these 21 different courtrooms, but there's also hierarchies like within those courtrooms, as well.
Hmm.
And this is your space. I want you to, just sort of lead on this. And you also have these other multiple hierarchies that you work across, because coalition building in a system like the judiciary is really your zone of genius. And you also serve on multiple committees and councils. So, Mid Atlantic Association, the Maryland Conference, the Judicial Council. And none of that is by accident, right? It's all strategic and all the groundwork that you've laid to get to where you are. So, talk to me about your approach to building strategic alliances in these rigid systems across all of this hierarchy.
The way that I, look at my participation in these different committees and association and that sort of stuff is at the end of the day, they all come back. They all tie into sort of that big picture. I used to always like say to my staff and, to just colleagues that within your respective court to ensure that you're sort of putting your court out there, your participation in these work groups and these committees and et cetera are important because that's where you get to shine. That's where you get to really talk about what your court is doing. That's where others are interested in some of the things that are going on in your court. So I really believe in sort of that partnership and that involvement on that level. And if you think about courts, the structure, you talk about sort of that formal power. You have your judges, you have the chief judge, you have your circuit court judges, then you have the judicial assistant staff, and each person plays a role, but there's this sort of that informal aspect of it. And I feel like that's where those committees and that sort of stuff come into play because those are not people that you report to. Those are people that you might have similar interests and you want to sort of build a relationship because those relationships then become very important because yes, you have the formal power, but the people who get the work done are the ones that sometimes we don't really think about or overlook. Even for me, I wanted to know everyone. The cleaning person, the because those are the people I will call upon when something goes wrong. I'm not going to call the chief judge to say, "Hey, how do we fix this?" I will go to the source, those relationships, those trust relationships that you have built. Likewise, in my committees that I sit, sometimes when I have issues within my respective jurisdiction, the solution is out there. It's in those relationships that I've formed. So I would call someone from my MACAM, even though they're in a whole different state, they might be faced with similar stuff. And so I really take pride in the forging of those relationships and maintaining those relationships because they do help in the work that I do. And that's the key to really building those relationships. That's key to just making sure that your court is just moving in the direction that you envision.
That is so important because I think a lot of leaders hear building coalitions and think it means compromising or being transactional or just sort of showing up for
Yeah.
the reception. But what you're describing is different. And how do you maintain authenticity in all of that?
I think over time, it's just you're just trying to be true to your values and, the vision that you have and just to yourself. And I feel like a lot of times we feel like we have to compromise something, but we don't. We're all learning from each other, each one teach one, as they say. And I think that you just stay true to your belief over time. The trust that you've built is what really sustains those relationships and you show up as your authentic self. When I said the word authentic self just now, I think back to when I was in Baltimore City. So I was new at that time to the court environment because that's where I started. I was finished with grad school, but I've spent, I want to say maybe 21, 22, 20 something, half of my life I spent in Belize, growing up in Belize, and then the other half in the US. So I've had, let's start with accent and, and just the way of life. And I remember I always wanted to try to sort of change who I was to fit into the system. And I remember a judge was like, "We like you just the way you are." She was like, "Why are you trying to change? Don't change who you are because that's you. And so that's your authentic self." And I feel like when I realized that, I just did things based on that, based on my belief in something. If I strongly believe in it, then I went after it. I utilized the circle that I had around me, that trust circle, and did it, but I just didn't try to change because a lot of times we feel, especially as Black women, we feel like, oh, we're being looked upon and we have to do things a certain way. No, I just do. If it's there and there to me, if that I will just do it.
That is so powerful and what a gift to get that earlier on in your career because that's the greatest advice
Mhm.
and the way that you will have the biggest impact if you just go with just sort of who you are from the beginning. You don't have to make up time. So powerful. Stephanie, I want to explore something that I know we both experience and this unique challenge of leading change when you may be the first person in that role and everyone's watching. So you're making history, which means that you're under scrutiny, but you also know the need to actually implement change. And how do you navigate between that tension?
Yes, being the first people are watching, they're not just watching what you decide. I always say they're not really focusing on your decisions. They're focusing on whether you can be trusted with that power that has been given to you, right? In that sense. And
That
so
part, right?
that part. So I think it goes right back to just being true to your values. And for me, it was just that. It was always building that relationship, getting that buy-in, involving people, involving those that actually are doing the work. Because I think that was for me in the judiciary, that's the most important thing. Not just because you're at the top. Yes, I can sit here all day, call my admin judge and say, hey, I have an idea. We should do this. And let's just implement it. And it wouldn't succeed because I didn't get buy-in. So for me, because I sort of came up into the judiciary when I started as a analyst. I was working for the judge in charge of criminal. And so we were just looking at criminal cases and how we would try cases, et cetera. And so, I moved on up from that into court administration and that sort of stuff. So I understood the value of including individuals in the decision-making process. And for me, that is what has carried me through as far as I am right now. It's really to go sit with my managers and departments and say, hey, we have an idea of something that we want to implement. Can you give me some of your feedback? What does the data say? What are your staff saying about that? Have you ever tried something, especially since I was new to sort of this environment? I needed to understand, was this ever done before? And if it was something that you guys tried, why didn't it succeed? And just kind of listening to their stories and then realizing. And when we implement stuff, there was never pushback because people felt ownership. They felt like, you know what, we were part of this process. And so I think that's something that I really value is just getting people's buy-in in decision making and then implementation.
Yeah. And it also sounds like a very strategic way to convert whatever skepticism, whether that's lived
Hmm.
or perceived skepticism, into
Correct.
advocacy, right? And so getting other people on board because there is this real dynamic. People simultaneously resist change, but also want change and are waiting to see if you succeed or fail. But, having that ability to turn the skepticism into advocacy and engaging others along the way to help to champion you on this change journey is really, really smart.
Yeah.
And we all know the pitfalls of trying to change too much too fast and the things that you can do to lose credibility or to go too slow and to lose momentum. And so, how do you know when to push or when to wait? Do you also use those same processes for buy in to check the pulse on that as well?
Yes, I agree with you. I feel like pushing is about courage and waiting is about respect. And as a true leader, you have to know when the moment calls for either one. Because there's a lot. I can't always say that, you push full steam ahead or you wait, but I think a lot of decisions, I used to always say I'm very deliberate. So I really want to understand, sort of that big picture. But there are a lot of times when you had to make a decision, there are certain things in the judiciary that we have to make a decision right away. We can't wait. For example, we have one of the things that we're seeing across judiciaries is just that whole community involvement when you're trying to really think about communities and the courts. And a lot of times maybe you're getting feedback, whether it be positive or, complaints from the public in terms of maybe how their public perception of the judiciary. And we see like research is saying sometimes that's looking like it's very low. Individuals come to court, they might not feel like something went the way they want, and that's one aspect. But maybe they went to a window and they had to wait in long lines, and by the time they got to that window, they still didn't get the service that they need. So one of the things that we've done in Baltimore County is that we have an access to justice resource center that was recently created. And it's sort of to create that space where public can come in and they can meet with a staff that can help sort of guide them through the process, not give legal advice, but just sort of help them maybe fill out a paperwork. Maybe they need language services, and accommodation and that sort of stuff. And while we were in the process of trying to implement or create this center, rather than wait. This was one of the examples where you just push forward because you realize that there was this need in the community. The public needed this. And
Yeah.
so you create the space and then you figure how to extend it or expand rather than sometimes we want to have this perfect. We want, okay, let's design a space and make sure we have X, Y, and Z. And then how do we get the funding and stuff rather than just create the space and then build upon it. And I think that's what we did. And it worked. We had a soft launch and we were getting a lot of feedback. And now we have a whole center, but we didn't start that way. But a lot of times we feel as individuals, we have to have it all, even in our own personal
In our
lives.
own personal lives, right?
We want it the way we want it instead of just baby steps to get to that grand.
Yeah, and just building it
Yeah.
while you're doing it. That is very, very powerful and so true in many aspects of our life. Like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And there are, little micro steps that you can take to also build that trust and turn that skepticism into advocacy as opposed to doing a full blown change, to give people a little bit of a taste on what they might be able to expect, especially if you're really sure about it and you have really good data and information that it could have a strong impact. I think, your point here around community is great. So I do want to make a shift to something that connects directly to our podcast mission. So political intelligence isn't just about individual advancement, and your work isn't just about individual advancement. It's about using that influence to create systemic change. And you're doing that in multiple ways in your role in the judiciary and through your committee work and through support of your home country in Belize. So, talk to us about how political intelligence enables broader transformation beyond your individual role. Tell us about this amazing work that you're doing in Belize.
Yes. So political intelligence, that's very important because for me, how I view it is that political intelligence gives you the access and then your purpose tells you what you actually will do with it. And so, it's important to sort of navigate that space. A very close dear friend of mine, I consider her my sister, started an organization. She's based in California and she started this organization, Immuna for the children. And the basic goal was to just ensure that, equipping families and communities, children with the tools necessary to just move forward in life. I think for the past maybe 2 or 3 years, she had been going to Belize and just doing sort of like Christmas toy drives, or just if she heard of, a family or a child in need of something, she would sort of do it. But this year we sort of put a little bit more structure into the process and we had a toy drive, which was very successful. We went to Belize in December. We served, I want to believe it was 500 plus kids. So we started up north. We went to a school in the Corozal district, and then we moved into Belize rural area, and then we went to the Cayo district. And it was an adventure. I also partner with the Queen of the Bay, which I am a former queen.
Hey,
So
Queen.
hey, so so that was a good connection that I had. And so the current queen, the reigning queen, we partnered with her and another former queen. They came with us to communities and schools to help hand out gifts to the children. And it was so well received. It was very close and dear because my friend Charla, who is the founder of the organization, we are both Belizeans. So it was really giving back. But when I thought about all of this, and when you think about political intelligence, or you just think about politics, if we just want to just use that word politics, a lot of times we think that those individuals, those leaders are the ones that we wanted to connect with, but we did not. We looked at it from a different standpoint, from the community, because that's the people that the principals, the local leader, those are the ones that really understand the community and can get you that buy-in. And so those are the individuals that we work with. So this had nothing to do with, the politics of it all. And I think that's what makes things successful. A lot of times we're always looking at, what is the government doing and that sort of stuff. But, the work that you're doing in your community is very important. And just working with your local leaders or the schools and, to just kind of spread the message and get the word out there. So we're hoping to continue the drives. We wanted to do a back to school drive and just other things and kind of just give back to Belize. And for me, it really helps. I mean, I started, as I had mentioned, when I used to be in Belize, I worked for Red Cross, and that right there, I
Yes.
think, laid the foundation for
Yes.
just working in communities, really understanding the power of when people come together, for shared purposes and, to just get something done. And I believe in volunteers. I mean, that's what the Red Cross is built on, and just understanding how that works and giving back. Doesn't matter where you are, you can always go back to your land of your birth and, and give back in different ways. And so that's what the whole organization is about. That's what we want to do, to give back.
I love this. And so here's what I'm hearing: the political intelligence you have built is not by accident, right? That it
Correct.
was inherent in you, and the understanding of systems and how to transform them. And that translates into your ability to continue to support and transform communities and to support the people who most need the support, that is not about individuals, that it's about community and the
Mhm.
capacity to do amazing things to and for and with people that has tremendous impact, because at the end of the day, it's the collective that matters the most.
Yep. You align with those trusted voices.
So, so, so powerful. Here's my final question for the leaders listening who are building their own political intelligence. What's the bridge between using it for personal advancement and using it to create pathways for others? How do you think about that?
I think the second part of that, I do believe that using it to create pathways for others. I always say you don't just learn how power works, but you learn how to use it to make space for someone else. I mean, a lot of times we're talking about walking into a room, owning that space, getting a seat at the table. Those are some of the buzzwords that we've heard. And I think it's important as Black women, as leaders in our communities, to ensure that, we are paving the way for the future, for the next generation, and making sure that the things that we've learned, we're creating those pathways, as you mentioned. And so for me, everything that I do, I feel that I do it with that in mind. The person coming in behind me, even with my staff, I have two deputy court administrators, and I always say that when I'm gone, I want to make sure. I mean, that talks about my leadership, that they can just step into a role and just continue the work that we've been doing, because we've been doing it together. And so they always feel like they have had a part to play in shaping how the judiciary, how this particular court is functioning. And I feel like that's important because leadership does set the tone. And so as a leader, I need to be doing that. I need to be creating these opportunities for my staff to ensure that they can pick up where I left off.
Oh, wonderful. And how can we support the charity that you are so passionate about?
Yes, well, we do have a website. So immuniaforthechildren.org is the website. And we're updating it now to showcase the stuff we've recently done in Belize. There is a give butter where you can donate cash. You can reach out and donate actual goods. Connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram, Immunia for the Children, Immunia Inc., sorry. And then we're on Facebook too. To just kind of find out about the work that we're doing and how you can support it. We're always going to be putting information out there for the next event that we're going to be having.
Okay. Well, we will make sure that all of those links are active
Yes.
in the show notes for those who are interested. And for individuals who are interested in court administration, where would they get started?
That's a good question. I love to promote the National Center for State Courts. That's one of my go-to resource, and it works for people in different countries too. It's sort of that body of research on court administration, court management. There's a lot of resources on that website, and it's just ncsc.org, and it really gives you anything that you need to understand how courts are working across the United States, and then in some of the countries that they do have a presence. I am an ICM graduate, so like I said, I teach ICM courses, and I'm hoping to do the fellowship program at some point. It's called the Institute for Court Management, And it's really a great resource for those thinking about a career in courts. That would be a good place to start, be the National Center for State Courts, and see what they have offerings, the different offerings that they have.
Well, Mrs. Stephanie Medina, you are a revolutionary leader. Thank you so much for this conversation. It has been great to have you on as a guest. And for leaders this week, practice what I call political intelligence reflection. Identify one organizational dynamic or decision-making process you don't fully understand yet. Map the formal and informal power structures. Ask yourself, who really influences this? What unwritten rules govern it? How could I understand this more deeply? Help you create more equitable outcomes. Share your insight using hashtag revolutionary leadership to connect with our community. For organizations, examine how your institutional norms either support or undermine first and only voices. What political dynamics create barriers? What frameworks could you redesign to distribute power more equitably? For emerging professionals, begin developing political intelligence now. Being strategic about power dynamics isn't selling out, it's understanding systems so you can change them. Like Stephanie, learn to assess the landscape before you act. Connect with Stephanie's work supporting children and families in Belize. The links will be in the show notes. Again, this is a Black women-owned organization creating community impact through dignity and love. And connect with me on social media at Revolutionary Lead and visit revolutionarylead.com. I want to hear from you. What political dynamics are you navigating and what's working for you? Let's build tomorrow's leadership blueprint together. This conversation reminds us that organizational politics isn't about manipulation or compromise. It's about understanding power structures so we can transform them while maintaining complete integrity. Black women have long mastered the art of navigating systems not designed for our leadership. Stephanie Medina shows us how to do this strategically, assessing political landscapes, building authentic coalitions, influencing with intention, and creating systems change that opens doors for generations to come. When leaders develop political intelligence, they don't just survive traditional institutions, they transform them, creating new possibilities for everyone who follows. Thank you for being on the show, Stephanie. That's exactly what revolutionary leadership looks like. Thank you for this conversation, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to more connections.
And now for my favorite part of the show. This is where women share their experience with my teachings.
Hi, I'm Dinah Beckton, District Attorney for Contra Costa County in California. And I'm just taking a minute to talk about how amazing our convening was in October of 2025 when 10 Black women prosecutors gathered for a convening sponsored by the Vera Institute. We arrived not just carrying our titles, but we also brought our vulnerabilities, our courage, our bold leadership, and our commitment to justice that's unwavering. We came from all over the country. We shared a specific reality, and that is that as we're navigating these unforgiving intersections of race and gender and leadership in systems that are not built with us in mind, it comes with a lot of challenges. I also not only want to thank Vera for bringing us together and giving us a space, a safe space to reflect and to restore and to recenter ourselves, if you will, as we continue to do this work. And certainly I want to praise the amazing leadership of Dr. Kerry that just gave us an invitation to be honest and to live every day in ways that remind us that our leadership begins with self-awareness. Dr. Kerry introduced us to this amazing framework that I will carry with me for years and years and years to come, called RAISE. And it is a model that was not only practical, but also profoundly affirming for each of us. And each of the letters, obviously, is an acronym, stand for something, but I'm just going to lift up a couple of them. The R, which really is a life-changing observation, and that is that we should respond with core values. In these leadership positions, particularly in prosecution, we are constantly asked to respond to a crisis, to a controversy, to a criticism. And because it is so constant, we might tend to be reactive. But what the letter R, raise, teaches us is to respond with our core values, values like justice and integrity and equity and humanity, and even our faith perspectives and our upbringings, all of our lived experiences that have gotten us to the place where we are today. And so it helps us to drown out the noise, keeps us grounded and clear, and leading, if you will, with purpose and not with fear. So I'm just this model. And then also another thing that was very, very provocative and just thoughtful is the letter I, which is strategic self-care. Because, we always get praised for our endurance, but we also need to rest. And what that model does, that raise model, it reframes our self-care as being a strategy. It's strategic. It's not selfish. It allows us to sustain ourselves and to refill ourselves, gives us permission to just push the pause button and set boundaries and recognize that showing up exhausted is not some kind of a badge of honor. We can show up as a whole rested leader, which really is going to help and inform how we go forward. So those are just a couple of insights that I wanted to lift up from this amazing time that we had together. I am deeply grateful to the Vera Institute for recognizing the importance of investing in Black women leaders and creating a space for us that is courageous and affirming and safe. And again, Dr. Kerry, thank you. Thank you for your care, your wisdom, and your masterful facilitation. You helped us rename how we move forward. And so this RAISE framework that you have left us with is a leadership stance, and it allows us to move forward with clarity and with courage, but also understanding there's a need for us to rest.
Thank you for sharing your brilliance, your compassion, and your commitment to Black women, leading with power, ease, and strategy. Thank you for listening to Revolutionary Leadership. If today's conversation sparked something in you, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share this episode with another change maker in your life. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, joy, and revolution.
Free.